When people think about using software and which software to use, typically they think about this as a practical question. Often people will say software is just a tool, which represents a narrow way of looking at the question. So people will ask, how convenient is this software? How reliable is this software? How much does it cost me to run this software? And those are important practical questions, but there are more important questions which they ignore. The most important question about software is, does it respect our freedom? What kind of way of life are we allowed to have if we use that software? That's the question you ignore if you think that software is just a tool, because different programs are distributed in different kinds of social systems, and they permit different ways of life for their users. Thus, we have proprietary software, which keeps the users divided and helpless, and we have free software that respects the user's freedom. Proprietary software keeps users divided because everyone is forbidden to redistribute it to anybody else. And it keeps users helpless because they don't have the source code, so they can't change anything, and therefore, and they can't even verify what the program is really doing. So this is a way of life that is unjust. It's the only way of life possible using proprietary software. But free software respects the user's freedom. So free software is distributed in an ethical way. But what do we mean when we say respects the user's freedom? There are 4 essential freedoms that the user should always have. Every user of software deserves these freedoms. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you wish. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it so that the program does what you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to help your neighbor, the freedom to redistribute copies to others, the freedom, and this includes up to republication of the program. And freedom 3 is the freedom to contribute to your community. That's the freedom to distribute your modified versions to others when you wish. Each of these freedoms means you're free to do a certain thing when you wish, if you wish. You're not required to do these things. So as a user of free software, well, you don't have to run the program if you don't like it. You don't have to ever look at the source code, and if you do, you don't have to change it. You don't have to distribute copies at any particular time or ever. And if you make modified versions, you're not required to distribute them. The point is that you must be free to do these things if and when you wish. Nobody else should stop you from doing these things. So if a program gives you all 4 of these essential freedoms, that means it's free software. In other words, it's distributed to you in a social system that is ethical and permits you to live in a way of life where you cooperate with other people and you control your own life. But if the program is missing one of these 4 freedoms, then it is proprietary software, which means that the social system of its distribution and use is unethical. That program should not be developed at all. Developing a free program and making it available to people is a contribution to society, something that we would like to reward if we can. Developing a proprietary program is creating a trap for people to fall into. It's an attack on society, something that we would actually prefer to punish, not reward. But why are these 4 freedoms essential? Why define free software this way? Freedom 2, the freedom to help your neighbor, the freedom to make and then distribute exact copies of the program when you wish, is essential on basic ethical grounds so that you can live an ethical, upright life as a good member of your community. If you use a program that doesn't give you freedom number 2, then you are in danger of falling into a moral dilemma. At any moment, whenever your friend says, "That's a nice program, could I have a copy?" At that moment, you will find yourself in a choice between 2 evils. One evil is to give your friend a copy and violate the license of the program. The other evil is to deny your friend a copy and comply with the license of the program. Once you're in that dilemma, you ought to choose the lesser evil, which is to give your friend a copy and violate the license of the program. What makes this the lesser evil? Well, if you can't help doing some kind of wrong to somebody, it's better to do wrong to somebody who deserves it. We can assume that your friend is a good friend and a good member of your community and normally deserves your cooperation. Whereas the developer of this proprietary program has deliberately attacked the social solidarity of your community, deliberately tried to separate you from your friends. So, better to do the wrong that falls on him instead of doing it to your friend. However, to be the lesser evil does not mean it's good. It's never a good thing to make an agreement and then break it. Now, some agreements are inherently evil, and keeping them is worse than breaking them. This is an example. However, even though breaking the agreement is better, it's still not good. And if you do give your friend a copy, what will he have? He will have an unauthorized copy of a proprietary program. And that's a pretty bad thing. It's almost as bad as an authorized copy would be. In fact, the only advantage, ethically speaking, of the unauthorized copy is that in some cases it avoids rewarding the perpetrator. So, even the lesser of these 2 evils is not very good. So, what you should really do, once you have understood this subject, is make sure you never find yourself in this dilemma. There are 2 ways to do that. One is, don't have any friends. That is the method. I don't think I can drink that many of them.
We're going to put you in you.
Okay. I hope someone else will help. So, not having any friends is the method suggested by the proprietary software developers. But the other method is don't use proprietary software. If you don't have the program, you don't have to worry about what you would say if your friend asks for a copy. That's my solution. If someone offers me a program on the condition that I promise not to share it with you, then no matter how attractive it might be, no matter how convenient it might be, I will say no. I will say my conscience does not permit me to accept that condition. Once I was listening to John Perry Barlow give a speech, And he started by asking the people in the audience to raise their hand if they had no unauthorized copies of software. And he was really surprised to see a hand go up. And then he said, "Oh, it's you, Richard," because he understood why. All my copies are authorized because they're all free software, and everybody can make authorized copies. Everybody is free to do so. The most essential resource of any society is not a physical resource. It's a psychosocial resource. It's the spirit of goodwill. It's the spirit of helping your neighbor. The level of this resource makes the difference between a livable society and a dog-eat-dog jungle. It's no accident that humanity's ethical leaders, or those who have tried to be ethical leaders for thousands of years, have explicitly tried to encourage this spirit of goodwill. So what does it mean when powerful social institutions say that it's wrong to help your neighbor? What are they doing? They are poisoning this vital resource, something no society can afford. And what does it mean when they say that if you share with your neighbor, you're a pirate? What are they saying? They're trying to equate helping your neighbor with attacking a ship. And nothing could be more wrong than that, because attacking ships is very, very bad, but helping your neighbor is admirable. And what does it mean when they impose harsh punishments on people for sharing with their neighbors? How much fear is it going to take before your neighbors are too scared to share with you anymore, or before you are too scared to share with them? I hope that we can bring an end to the terror campaign of the proprietary software developers, so that we don't have to live with that kind of fear. And I use the term terror campaign for good reason, because in 2 countries so far, the proprietary software developers have threatened people with rape for having unauthorized copies of proprietary software. And when you threaten people with rape, I think that qualifies as a terror campaign. So that's the reason why freedom number 2 is essential. This is the freedom to help your neighbor. That is the freedom to make exact copies of the program and distribute them to other people when you wish. Freedom 0, the freedom to run the program as you wish, is essential for a different reason, so you can control your own computing. There are proprietary programs that restrict the use of authorized copies. They restrict who can run them, or on which computers, or how many people, or for how long, or for what purpose. And this is obviously not having control of your own computing. So freedom 0 is essential. But it's not enough, because that is just the freedom to do or not do whatever the program is already designed to let you do. So you still don't have control. The developer still has power over you, but instead of exercising that through a license, he exercises it through the code of the program. So in order to control our own computing, we need freedom number 1, which is the freedom to study the source code and then change it so that the program does what you want. This way, you decide what computing you're going to do, because the developer can't control you. If you use a program without freedom number 1, you can't even tell what it is doing. Lots of proprietary programs contain malicious features. They spy on the user. They restrict the user. They even, they spy on the user. They're designed to restrict the user. They may even be designed to attack the user. For instance, spyware is quite common. One non-free program that you may have heard of that spies on the user is called Microsoft Windows. When the user of Windows, and I won't say you because I'm sure you wouldn't use a program like this, when the user of Windows uses the menu feature to search her own files for a word, Windows sends a message saying what word was searched for. That's one spy feature. But there's another. When Windows XP asks for an upgrade, it sends Microsoft a list of all the programs installed on the machine. Another spy feature, but there might be others. You see, Microsoft did not announce the existence of those spy features. People had to figure it out, and it wasn't easy. So there might be others that people haven't found yet. We can never tell. But spying is not limited to Windows. Windows Media Player also spies on the user. In fact, I'm told it reports everything the user looks at. However, such spying is not limited to Microsoft. Please don't think that Microsoft is uniquely evil and only Microsoft would do a thing like this. In fact, Real Player spies on the user the same way. And I suspect Real Player did it first because Microsoft is more known for imitating than for inventing. The TiVo also spies on the user. And this is a very interesting case because the TiVo contains a lot of free software. The TiVo contains a small GNU plus Linux operating system. And when the TiVo came out, many people in the free software community actually thanked the developers for using our software. Now, I think that's a little bit backwards. When they use our software, they should thank us. The time for us to thank people is when people contribute to free software, not when they take advantage of it. But be that as it may, they're welcome to use our software, although it would be nice if they said thank you. But in addition to this free software, the TiVo also contains proprietary software, and it spies on the user. And this shows that it's a mistake to set the goal that products should, quote, use free software, unquote, because implicitly that means use free software for some of what it does, and that's not enough. If you want to have freedom, you have to insist on using exclusively 100% free software, because any non-free program is taking your freedom away. But the malicious features go beyond just spying. There's also the functionality of refusing to function, where the program says, I don't want to let you see this file even though it's on your computer. I don't want to let you copy part of this file. I'm not going to print this file for you because I don't like you. I'm not talking about errors here. I'm talking about intentional features designed to restrict you. These are known as Digital Restrictions Management, or DRM for short. The deliberate functionality of refusing to function for you. Now, in addition to spying on the user, the TiVo also implements digital restrictions management. And so does Microsoft Windows, and so does Mac OS. Apple is quite famous for the malicious restrictions of iTunes. And many other software developers implement the same malicious feature of restricting the user. In fact, it's such a big danger that we have a campaign against digital restrictions management, a campaign of protests. We've had protests in front of Microsoft announcements. We've had protests in front of Apple stores. We've had protests in front of movie theaters because Hollywood is to a large extent responsible for the implementation of digital restrictions management. We want people who go to the movies to realize what they're supporting. But it can get worse and worse. In fact, the whole point of Windows Vista is to make this worse. What Microsoft is doing with Vista is they figure they have so much power already that they can pull the chain tighter. That's what Vista is. For more information, take a look at badvista.org. This is a campaign urging people who use Windows to at least not use Vista. You know, we hope that they will give up on using proprietary software and move to the free world. But if they're not ready to do that, at least they shouldn't let things get worse. Vista makes users throw away lots of hardware and buy replacements. And the reason is the replacements are designed specifically to restrict the user more. That is what Vista is for. But malicious features go even further. There are also the features designed to attack the user, backdoors. One proprietary program you may have heard of that contains a backdoor is called Microsoft Windows. You see, when Windows asks for an upgrade, Microsoft knows more or less the user's identity, which means Microsoft can deliver to him an upgrade designed specifically for him, which means that Microsoft can take control of his computer and do anything it wants to. And Windows Vista is designed to force centralized upgrading on the user. So it's designed with a backdoor. In fact, some U.S. government agencies have said that they prohibit its use because it's a security danger. Now, that's the backdoor we know about because we can deduce it from the known facts. But there might be more. A few years ago in India, I was told that they had arrested some programmers who were working on developing Windows and accused them of working for Al-Qaeda, introducing another backdoor which Microsoft wasn't supposed to know about. Well, this attempt apparently failed. Was there another that succeeded? We have no way of checking. But we do know that Microsoft installed a backdoor for the use of another, even more violent terrorist organization, the United States government. This was discovered in 1999. It appears that a piece of server software had a backdoor for the use of the National Security Agency, the electronic spying agency. So what this shows is that you can't trust a non-free program which denies you freedom number one. All of these programs are just trust me software. They all demand blind faith in the developer because the user can't do anything but give blind faith. The user has no way to check anything. So there are proprietary programs in which we know about malicious features, and there are others in which we have not found any malicious features. And maybe that's because there are none, or maybe there are some and we just don't know it yet. But you can never be sure that a proprietary program without freedom one, you can never be sure it has no malicious features. Either you found some or you just don't know. But what about the ones that don't have malicious features? We don't know which ones they are, but I'm sure they exist. But what can you say about them? Well, their developers are human, so they make mistakes. Their code has errors. And the user of a program without freedom number one is just as helpless facing an accidental error as she is facing a deliberate malicious feature. If you use a program without freedom number one, then you're a prisoner of your software. We, the developers of free software, are also human. So we also make mistakes, and our code also has errors. The difference is that when you find an error in our code or any functionality that doesn't suit you, you're free to change it. We can't make ourselves perfect, but we can respect your freedom. And that makes all the difference. But freedom number one is not enough, because that's the freedom to personally study and change the program's source code. This is not enough for millions of computer users that don't know how to program. They can't personally exercise freedom number one. But even for programmers like me, freedom one is not enough, because there's just too much software. In fact, there's just too much free software for any one person to study it all and master it all and personally make all the changes that she might want, because that's more than one person can do. So the only way that we can fully take control of our own computing is to do it working together, cooperating. And for that, we need freedom three, the freedom to contribute to your community, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others when you wish. With this freedom, one person can make an improvement and publish it, and then someone else can start from there and make another improvement, and someone else can start from there and make another improvement, and we can all get the result. So this way, you don't have to implement personally all the changes you want, because other people will do them too. If there are 1 million users of a free program that want a certain change, by chance we can expect a few thousand of them know how to program. And sooner or later, a few of them will make the change and publish their modified version, and then all those 1 million people can use it. And that includes the majority that wouldn't know how to write that change themselves. They can still install it once it's available. And it includes thousands of other programmers who could have made the change, but they didn't have to, because it only has to be done once. The result is that all users get the benefit of the 4 freedoms. Every user can take advantage of freedom 0 and 2, the freedom to run the program as you wish, and the freedom to distribute exact copies to others. You don't need to know how to program to do those things. Freedoms 1 and 3 entail programming, the freedom to study and change the source code, you have to do, that's programming, so you have to know how to program in order to exercise that freedom. And likewise, freedom 3, unless you have changed the source code, you don't have a modified version to publish. So each user can only exercise these freedoms to the point that he knows how to program. And that's not a binary question. It's not all or nothing. It can be quite useful for people to learn to do a little bit of programming so they can make easy changes, even if they don't get really good at it to the point where they could make hard changes. Just as millions of people find it useful to learn to do some maintenance on their automobiles, even though they don't learn enough to be professional mechanics. But in any case, not everybody knows how to take advantage of these freedoms directly. But when programmers do modify the program and publish their modified version, all of us get to use the result. So all of us get the benefit of the fact that in our society we have these freedoms. It's somewhat like freedom of the press. Most people don't write articles for publication. Most people don't know how to write well enough to write articles for publication. But it is essential for all of us that people have the freedom to do so that our views can be expressed by others, if not by us. And likewise, these freedoms for free software mean that the changes we want can be made by others, if not by us. And the result of these 4 freedoms put together is democracy. Free software develops democratically under the control of its users. The users decide what it will do. And nobody has power to impose that decision on anybody else. This is not classical electoral democracy. We don't have an election where to decide whether the program will do this or that and then impose the result on everybody. But it's still a kind of democracy because the users have control over what the program does. The way the users exercise this control is by participating in the development when they want to. So if there are a lot of users that want progress in this direction, they will frequently make changes that go in this direction. And thus the program will make more rapid progress in this direction. If there's a smaller number of users who want progress in this direction, they can still do it, but chances are they will not do it as much. So it will make progress in this direction, but not so fast, unless those users are really super dedicated. And if nobody wants progress in this direction, it won't happen. Because nobody is in a position to impose on the users of a free program. By contrast, a proprietary program develops under the sole control of its developer. The developer has power over the users by deciding what to put in the code or what not to put in the code, and the users have no recourse. The users are subjugated. So it's democracy or dictatorship. What happens if there are just 1,000 users of a free program that want a certain change? And suppose none of them knows how to program. They can still make use of the 4 freedoms to get the change they want. Here's how they can do it. They can get in touch with each other and start an organization. And then they all join the organization, which means each one has to pay dues. And this way the organization collects a sum of money to pay programmers to do the work. So if it's a medium-sized job and it needs a programmer to work for a month, maybe it costs $10,000. So the organization can say, pay $10 to be a member. That's not much money. Why should anybody not pay? So when these 1,000 people join and the organization has $10,000, then they have to decide who to hire. So they'll talk with some programmers and say, can you do this job? When could you have it ready? What would you charge? Let's see your portfolio so we can tell if you could do a good job of this. And then they would ask another group and another group and eventually decide who to hire. And this illustrates something interesting. Free software brings with it a free market for all kinds of support and services. The support for a proprietary program is typically a monopoly. Only the developer has the source code, so only the developer can make any change. If a user wants a change, the user has to beg and pray, "Oh, almighty developer, please make this change for me." Sometimes the developer says, "Pay us to listen to your problem." If the user does this, the developer says, "Thank you. In 6 months there will be an upgrade. Buy the upgrade and you'll see if we fixed your problem. And you'll see what new problems we have in store for you." But with free software, anybody that has a copy can study the source code, master it, and begin offering support. So we have a free market, and therefore those users, typically companies or organizations that really value good support, should insist on running free software so that they can get their support through a free market and in general get better support for their money. Support is always going to cost money because it requires people to spend their time for you in particular. But if the support comes from a monopoly, it's likely to be very expensive and lousy. The support companies for free software have to satisfy their clients because the clients can go someplace else to get support for the same software. This leads us to an interesting paradox. Usually, if there's a choice of products to do a job, we say there's no monopoly. But if there's a choice of proprietary software products, then yes, there is monopoly. If the user chooses this proprietary product, she falls into this monopoly for support. But if she chooses this proprietary product, she falls into this monopoly for support. So it's a choice between monopolies. And the only way to escape from monopoly is to escape from proprietary software, to escape to the free world. And that's what the free software movement is all about. We want to help everybody escape from proprietary software. And to make that possible, we have built a new continent in cyberspace, which is the free world. It's impossible to live in freedom in the old world of cyberspace where every program has its lord who bullies the users. So come and join us in the free world, the world of free software. Because this is a virtual continent, it has room for everyone. And because there were no indigenous peoples in cyberspace, we didn't displace any. Everyone is welcome in the free world. that paradox is an example of an important principle. Freedom is something much bigger than having a choice between a few fixed options. Freedom means having control of your own life. Sometimes people who want to argue that freedom is not really important start by saying that freedom really means freedom of choice. And when they do that, they're throwing away most of freedom and keeping just a little bit, because they're assuming that we're talking about a choice between a few fixed options. So once they have discarded most of freedom and they keep just a little bit, it's easy to show that that little bit of freedom is not so important. And they claim that they've proved freedom is not so important, but really they're ignoring most of what freedom means. So if you see this fallacy, you'll be ready to refute it. To have a choice between proprietary software packages means being able to choose your master. Freedom means not having a master. And when you use software, freedom means not using proprietary software. And so the goal of the free software movement is the liberation of cyberspace for all of its inhabitants. And that is what I hope you will help to achieve. I reached these conclusions in an early form in 1983, and I decided I wanted to be able to use computers in freedom, and I wanted others to be able to do this as well. At the time, it was impossible because all the operating systems were proprietary software, and the computer won't run without an operating system. So it was impossible to get a modern computer and actually run it without proprietary software. So what could I do about this? Since I was just one man and not particularly famous, I didn't expect I could convince governments to change their laws. I didn't expect I could convince companies to change their practices. But there was one thing I was good at, and that was developing software, especially operating system software. That was my field. So I realized all I had to do was write an operating system and make it free software, and then everybody would be able to use computers and have freedom by using this system. So I had discovered a way to clean up this social problem through technical work. Furthermore, I realized that I was aware of this problem of non-free software, but most people didn't recognize it as a problem. For them, non-free software was the only way. They thought that's the only way it could ever be. They had never imagined anything else. So they accepted it as normal, the way people accept many kinds of social abuses as normal if nobody has ever suggested to them that there could be another way. Further, I had the skills necessary to try to solve this problem, and it looked like nobody else would do it if I did not. Therefore, I was elected by circumstances to do this work. It was my duty. It's as if you see somebody drowning and you know how to swim and nobody else is around, and it's not Bush or Berlusconi, Il Ducino. Then you have a moral duty to save that person. Well, actually, I can think of some other people you wouldn't have a duty to save. But aside from some exceptions, you'd have a duty to save the person. Well, we're not talking about swimming in this case. We're talking about developing software, but the moral logic is the same. So I decided that I would develop a free software operating system or die trying. of old age, presumably. Because at the time, the free software movement had no active enemies. Lots of people disagreed, but they just said that's silly and then paid no more attention. So the obstacle was not opposition, it was the large pile of different programs that we would have to develop to have an entire operating system. And when I started this project in January 1984, nobody knew, and I didn't know, whether it would ever be finished. But when you're fighting for freedom, you can't afford to wait until victory is within sight before you start. Because if you demand that much, you're going to miss most of the opportunities when you might have won. So you have to start at a point when you don't know whether you're going to win, and then maybe you will. I decided to make this a Unix-like operating system so it would be portable, and then I decided to make it Unix compatible so that the many Unix users could easily switch. And this determined all the initial design decisions because Unix consists of many components with documented specifications. To be compatible, you have to replace each component according to the specifications. So the only thing we needed was a name. And I chose the name GNU because it's a joke. You see, in the 1970s, I was part of a community of programmers who shared software. Some of us were students, and some of us were employees, but our main motivation was the fascination of programming, the joy, the fun. So we often chose amusing names for our programs. In fact, "Ha-ha, only serious" is sort of the motto of our community. I've never done anything in my life that was more serious than launching the free software movement, but I still wanted to make jokes while I was doing it. So I chose a name that's a recursive acronym. The name GNU stands for GNU's Not Unix. And I think that this joke translates into Italian as well. The point is, this is a way of giving credit to Unix for its technical ideas, but at the same time says that this is a different system, and that's absolutely crucial, because Unix was and is proprietary software. So we couldn't use Unix and have freedom. In order for this system to give us freedom, it had to be different. It had to be not Unix. So the most important thing about GNU is that it's not Unix. But at the same time, it's amusing. And the word GNU is also used for a tremendous amount of wordplay in English, because according to the dictionary, the G is silent, so it's pronounced new. So anytime you wanted to write the word new, you could write it GNU and you've got a joke. Perhaps not a very good joke, but there are lots of them. In any case, when it's the name of our system, please do not follow the dictionary. Please pronounce a hard G. If you talk about the new operating system, you will cause confusion because we've been working on it for over 23 years now, so it's not new anymore. But it still is GNU, and it will always be GNU, no matter how many people mistakenly call it Linux. Today, after many years of work, we have a free operating system. Actually, we have two of them. We have the GNU plus Linux operating system, which is basically GNU with Linux added as the kernel. And there's also the BSD system, which is also a free software operating system. So it's possible to use a computer in freedom as the result of many years of hard work. We started developing the GNU system in January 1984. In February 1992, Linux, the kernel, was made free software. And at that point, it was possible to make a complete free system by taking the almost finished GNU system and adding Linux, which was the last remaining piece. That's over 8 years of work. And then we had to do a lot more work to make the system powerful and convenient so that ordinary people could switch to it and find it usable. But today, that is so. People tell me that they have installed GNU/Linux in computer labs where non-technical people were using the system in place of Windows, and that they mostly didn't even notice. They didn't even find it hard to switch, really. The people who might find it a bit hard to switch are the people who are expert users because they've learned all the details. And to use free software, they have to learn different details. It's not really harder, it's just different. But still, it's something they have to learn. But ordinary people don't even have to learn very much. They can switch easily. And this is very important to know when you are encouraging people to make this switch. Because today, the reason why free software has not swept the world is because of inertia. Social inertia. And it takes many forms. But we have to overcome this obstacle of inertia in order to complete our mission of liberating cyberspace. In addition, we're starting to have something that we didn't have 20 years ago. Enemies, powerful, active enemies who are trying to stop the world from adopting free software, who are even trying to impose laws that prohibit free software. Not explicitly, not as such. The laws don't say, nobody has proposed a law saying free software is illegal. But there are laws that in specific cases, for specific uses, do prohibit free software. For instance, the United States and the European Union have unjust laws that forbid free software for accessing encrypted media, such as DVDs. In the United States, the free software to play the movie on a DVD is illegal. It's censored. Distribution of that software is a crime. In France, it's even worse. Just possessing a copy of that software is a crime. What it does is it lets you watch the movie without using unethical, non-free software. So what kind of government would pass a law like that? Obviously, a government that is working for the entertainment companies instead of its own citizens. That is, a government where democracy is very sick. And that's what we have. A government of the people, by the people, for the people would tell those big businesses to go jump in the lake. But that's not what we have. What we have is government of the people, by the flunkies, for the megacorporations. Politicians who will do whatever business tells them to do, except when people make a big enough storm of opposition. I'm sure you've seen what I mean. Why did the Italian government allow a war criminal like Bush into the country? It should have said, "You're not welcome here unless you want us to fly you to The Hague for trial."